On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk invisible speakers and big soundbars, CEDIA restarts in-person education, and Teams add some new features. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 233, Disjointed Connections.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Middle Atlantic. What great systems are built on.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of ResiWeek, your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my very good friends. First, we have Heather Sidorowicz. She is the president of Southtown AV. How you doing, sis?
Hello, friends. How's it going?
It's going great. Then we have Ken Eagle. He is the Senior Global Director of Training at Athlona. How are you, sir?
I am awesome. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us today. We are going to kick it off with a story that comes to us from Residential Tech Today and Daryl Wilkinson, which, first of all, it's great to see Daryl writing again. It's been a little bit since he's been writing, and it's great to see him back. So Daryl, thank you, and we're happy to see you back writing. Heard but not seen, these invisible architectural speakers offer beautiful sounds without ugly sights. If you have been in this industry for more than a minute, you have definitely had that argument, or shall we say conversation, with a interior designer or a spouse or someone involved who tells you that, no, you can't put that big black box above a fireplace or on that feature wall, and you definitely can't put speakers on the floor, on a shelf, in the wall, on the wall. Somehow, some way, someone has told you you cannot put a speaker where you want it. So Heather, let me start off with you. Invisible speakers have been around for a while. They kind of made their debut, if you will, kind of in the, I want to say, early 90s. And they were real hot for a while, then they simmered, now they're back. And I see lots of designers on Instagram touting this invisible sound and everything else. And I don't see integrators selling them very often, including myself, I pitched them. I've never once sold one.
I sold one, but ironically, that was back in the early 2000s, and that client eventually left and went with another AV firm, and lo and behold, that AV firm doesn't exist anymore, and the house was sold. So we were back today to look at the entire system, and yeah, it's just the concept is great, but I mean, you can make speakers virtually invisible because by putting them in the ceiling, because your eyes don't float up when you walk into a room. In-wall speakers always make me cringe when you walk in, because you can see them immediately. They stick out like a sore thumb. They're right at your eye level or right above your eye level, so you see them. In-ceiling speakers you have to look for. So even this house that we had done so many years ago, I find myself walking around the house looking up, trying to find where the in-ceiling speakers were. So yeah, I guess in a really high-end home, perhaps if you're not looking at, what happens when the speaker breaks or if there's an issue, then maybe, but no, not in my 18, 19 years. That was the only one we ever did.
That's not necessarily a ringing endorsement, but I don't disagree, because that has been kind of our approach too, is every time we pitch it, they go, oh, that sounds fantastic. We'll never see them. I'm like, no, it'll be just like drywall, and you'll hear it coming from that sort of location, depending on which brand you use, but the disbursement's really wide. It's great for background music, etc. And then they usually have the question, well, what happens if it needs to be fixed? And then we have to go down the road of, yeah, we're going to cut your wall open. Ken, when you see this, when you think about this side of that conversation, the construction aspect, is this something where you can overlook all of those things because they are just as good now, or occasionally even better than a traditional in-wall? Are you giving up that presence and that power for aesthetics?
Well, so I have a problem with it because I like big audio. I'm that guy who cranks the subwoofer way up and shakes the walls, and I like to hear everything happening. I love the bass loud. So for me, from an audio standpoint, it's difficult to sell this product because I'm not sure it performs the way I want to hear the audio. But from an aesthetic standpoint, it's great. I can tell you my wife would love it in a second, not to see the speaker anywhere. And also maybe not to have it quite as loud as I like to jam it. So
don't tell her about these.
Right, exactly. But the other thought I have on this is the mind frame I feel is of the consumer is a little different also today, because in the last, I don't know, let's say 5 years, we've got accustomed to sticking little things around the house in the form of a little audio, voice-enabled audio box, and we'll say whatever the keyword is, play my playlist or whatever, right? Whoever your brand is, Google, Alexa, something, and you play something. So people are used to seeing something now that's not necessarily hidden and interacting with it. So I think it's maybe a little bit tougher sell unless you're in a pure aesthetic environment where you really want to see nothing. And today that is getting big. I mean, you've got a lot of very clean line, uncluttered designs and houses. And so there's definitely a place for it, but I mean, it's a tough sell. I think I agree with you on what you said earlier. It's a tough one to get to sell.
Yeah, very good. Speaking of things that aren't necessarily tough to sell anymore, actually seem to almost sell themselves these days, Residential Systems has a great story on BlackWire being named the exclusive distribution partner, there's the word I'm looking for Sennheiser's AMBEO soundbar. Now, if you haven't seen this thing, you definitely need to go check this out. It is a monster of a soundbar. It is quite large. This is something that is being touted as really as if you were their sound experience with this new soundbar. It's got 13 drivers, 5.1.4 Dolby Atmos out of one single piece. Ken, we were talking pre-show about this and how much of a beast this seems to be. Is this that soundbar that really is going to become the leader in soundbars and really be that push for, this is one device that can do everything you need in most of your rooms. You don't need to go to separates. You don't need to go to amplifiers and speakers throughout the room. You can go to this and not sacrifice anything.
Well, it's kind of a two-part question for me. First part being, I think that this soundbar could be that soundbar you're talking about. Based on what I've read about it, it sounds like a monster. And I said I like to play it loud, and I think this one would do it. And it sounds pretty awesome. I love the size of it. I love the idea of maybe this is the single device, maybe eliminate the AVR, and we've got that one system to drive audio. The other part of this conversation, though, is if this is going to be the unit, I think you need to have more distribution than probably exclusivity with one distributor. There's so many avenues and options out there. I believe they distribute Yamaha and ELAC and maybe one other. And Sennheiser was an incredible audio company. I'm not sure they're quite synonymous with high-end residential audio yet, So I think they got the product. It seems like it could be that awesome piece, but I think they got to do some work to get it into the market, to be that leader.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, I will kind of preface that with, if you're specifically and only in the residential space, and you may only think of Sennheiser from some of their headphones, they are a class-leading microphone company in the commercial space, in the pro audio space. They have been just phenomenal the last couple of years with especially some of their boundary mics and ceiling mics that you're seeing in commercial audio all the time. Heather, when you see this is one of those products that they're touting as something that can obviously be an amazing fit in the home, but it can also be in commercial spaces, in boardrooms. You and I have had this back and forth multiple times in the vein of Sonos, that a lot of times when you have that soundbar Sonos conversation, you almost put an asterisk with it of it's not a receiver and surround speakers, but it's really, really, really good. And they just had the art come out, which again is really, really good. You can read my review on it on AVNation.tv. But it's even in the quote, even in the article, I alluded to, I had to compare it to my basement system, which is a true surround. Is this going to be the product that stops that comparison?
So I had to do two things while I had to look up the specs to see what the size was, because often these sound bars come out and they're really just speakers at that point, because this is almost 50 inches wide. This one's about 5-6 inches deep. It's, and it's retails, it looks for about $24.99. It's tough, right? Well, it's not really tough, because we all know, anyone that came from real home theater knows that those presence speakers, your surround speakers, still brings you in like no other. And although sound bars are trying to break through to be able to do that, most rooms are not a perfect four-walled room. Most rooms these days are multi-purpose rooms, and they're open to the kitchen. And that means that where's that sound bouncing off that's supposed to mathematically bounce off my wall and then come out behind me? It's not the same, but it can be really, really, really good. So I'm with you on there's ways to do it, but I think that no soundbar can match what having speakers around you, how that brings you in. How many times in your world have you paused the TV to say, like, did the police just go by? Oh no, that's the movie. That's the movie, right? That's when you know it's good.
Is there a price delta though that eliminates that conversation? If this is $2,500 in a box, right? You compare that to trying to get 500 watts out of a Denon or a Marantz or a Yamaha or a Sony, and 5 speakers and a sub. It doesn't take long
I'm with you on that. I'm going to say that's probably more it equates. It's a better comparison, right? So those speakers compared to what this is, I'm going to guess this is. I have not heard it, but I'm going to get that this is pretty solid. And I agree with Ken that Sennheiser is not what you go to think of for soundbars, certainly. Knowing on the commercial side, microphones for sure. You said Sennheiser, I say microphone.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's move on to our next story of the day. This comes to us from CE Pro. CEDIA is bringing back in-person education offerings. They had put a pause, obviously, on in-person training due to coronavirus, but they are now offering a few new in-person courses at their headquarters over in Fishers, Indiana, which is just outside of Indianapolis. They're doing their cabling and infrastructure technician program, as well as their home theater boot camp and advanced networking boot camp. These are slated to start in late August. As far as pretty much all of those, they're going to start the last 3 weeks of August there. And prior to being on site, there's going to be some a questionnaire you have to fill out for exposure and symptoms, as well as safety measures on site, including masks at all times inside the building, as well as temperature checks, et cetera, and reducing the class sizes to allow for social distancing and all that fun stuff. Heather, is this, there's really no way to kind of dance around this topic, but is this too soon? Is this something that you're looking at and going, yes, I might send a technician out to this? Or is it something where you just go, you know what, maybe not yet?
I have to say, so I'm in New York State, and New York State is really locked down. We have like handcuffs. So for those who are not in New York State, I think there's about 16 states right now that we're not allowed to travel to without coming back in quarantine for 14 days. I've had to cancel a family trip already. I've canceled a business trip again. So it's tough. So for me, because of that, I'm not sending anyone anywhere. I'm not even looking at it until this calms down in some way, shape, or form. However, from CEDIA's perspective, not all states are in that position. And how can you not restart and reboot this piece of it? Because this piece of the story is something that has to be hands-on. I don't think that anyone's doing a great job of learning virtually yet. There's certainly some pieces that we're taking out, but there's no great conferences that are virtually yet. So I see why they are in a position that they have to move forward. I don't think that it's bad from a pandemic standpoint. I think that we can be all responsible. From a salesperson standpoint, it's very hard to sell with a mask on.
That is the truth. And it gets very tiring doing service as well with a mask on. Ken, I'm really glad you are here for this, because I can't off the top of my head think of anybody who's more in this vein. You're a global director of training. This is your bag. This is what you do. First of all, speak to what Athlone is doing, and then speak to the challenges of what these programs are. I get why they have to do these in person. You can't necessarily explain and teach someone how to drill through a stud virtually. That's hard, especially when you're talking the intro boot camps. Not all of these technicians even have all the tools if they wanted to try and practice stuff at home. How do you balance courses and trainings that really do require some in-person hands-on techniques to all of the other trainings that can be remote? And when is it going to look like this is going to become the norm again?
Yeah. So those are really good questions. And you're right. It's stuff that we've been challenged with coming up with solutions for since the beginning of this. Globally, Atlona offers over 50 hands-on training courses a year. So that's a lot of people that we put through those training courses. Obviously, we, in a short window that we've had since the start of this pandemic, we haven't been able to completely transition 100% of taking all of those people who we can't see in person anymore and teaching them virtually. However, we have, in a very small amount of time, put together courses for our top tier of dealers who need to get that hands-on training right away. We have created virtual training for those guys. So we're addressing it in a couple ways. We've taken a lot of our courses, particularly our software type of courses, and transitioned those all to online. We already have a pretty robust online system, so we've enhanced it a bit more. But for those people who need the physical training, like you said, you can't drill through a stud virtually. So we have built a program now where we actually take those key dealers and we set them up with a kit of evaluation gear that we send to them. And they have some homework to kind of prep that system. And then they go through some of our online training. And then they schedule a date and they get online, just like we are right now, with one of my trainers for 2 full days, 2 8-hour days. And they go through hands-on training with the kit we just sent them, and an instructor on the other side, just like this. And that could be one person, or it could be up to 5 people, depending on, if in your office you had 5 technicians and you guys were in the office together, working together, but practicing proper social distance, and you were comfortable with that, you could have several people in the room, and we would virtually certify you hands-on remotely. And so we're doing that right now. We're scheduled out all the way through the end of 2020 right now. And then towards the end of the year, we'll evaluate and see what 2021 brings to see if we can revisit our online courses again. But it's a challenge for us to bring people into our actual facilities. We have 2 in North America, and we have 4 more internationally in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. And so we've closed all of them down. And while for a couple of reasons, it's difficult to bring people into our office environment where maybe we have employees returning to work and bring in unknown people. We can't take that risk for our employees. We can't take that risk for our partners that we want to bring in. So we've chosen not to open for factory training because of that. On top of that, there's other challenges inherent to somebody traveling to a facility to do training. And while I'm 100% confident that the folks at CEDIA have prepared their facility to be a safe environment, the fact is, if I were to go to that, I'd still have to drive in a car and stop at gas stations and rest stops, or I'd have to get in an airplane and fly. I'd have to eat at restaurants or fast food somewhere. The point is, I've got to make contacts in other places that are probably beyond my control and CEDIA's control to get there to that training. And it's difficult to ask people to do that or to put people in that situation. So at Lona, we haven't chosen to do that. We've built the virtual training. CEDIA is doing that. And like I said, I'm confident that they're taking the right steps to do that. But I know it's going to be a challenge to get everybody in there even still.
Yeah, that's the truth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap this up with our last story of the day. This comes to us from Engadget. Microsoft's new Teams feature is going to fight video conferencing fatigue. If you didn't know that was a thing, it's totally a thing. If you've done more than 2 or 3, as Ken's like, oh gosh, yes, will this ever end? What they're doing is they're doing a couple of things to try and address that with some new features and updates. Specifically, they are adding something that's called Together Mode that uses some AI processes to essentially try and put you in a like a classroom setting, tiered seating situation where all the participants are kind of green screened up against this thing to promote more that standard feel that you would expect if you were giving a lecture in a post-secondary environment or something such as that. They're also rolling out an additional feature called a dynamic view, which gives moderators more control over shared content that is displayed, as well as optimizing featured content and participants. So if you were stuck in a meeting with me, I could take over and you could have to, be forced to pay attention to my face and stuff, opposed to everyone else's, as Ken's kind of laughing there. So Ken, because of kind of what you just shared as far as what Athlona is doing, I'm confident that you were spending a boatload of time on Zoom or on Teams or whatever platform you guys are using. Is this something that is just kind of goofy, or is there actual science kind of behind what they're trying to do here? Or is this something that's just going to slow down your video call?
I don't know. I have 2 thoughts on it. Number one, I feel like it's a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, homework for everyone to make this work, to get a green screen, to all have the right resolution camera. I mean, there seems like there's a lot of pieces to blend this all into one AI background and make it look as good as the example they showed in the article. So that's a challenge a little bit. On the other side, it's kind of cool. It's kind of intriguing because right now you sort of get this, if you've seen any of if you've been on one or seen any of these larger Teams or Zoom calls, it's sort of like Brady Bunch on steroid. You got these little squares of people all over the place, and everybody's got a different background, and everybody's got something different going on. And as much as I'm trying to listen to what you have to say, Matt, Heather's got a crazy background. I'm trying to figure out what the dog's doing back there right now. And so there is a little bit of
that's my favorite one. Have you seen that one where there's somebody that they're just driving around?
I'll have to look for that one. I haven't seen it. But, it does provide for a lot of good comedy, but it can be a distraction too. So I think there's probably a segment of people who could benefit from this tool. As goofy as maybe it could be, it actually may have some functionality too.
Heather, when you see this, one of the big pushes in the story on this is that it's going to be very effective potentially in that classroom environment. You've got kids that may or may not be going back to school in September. My kids are currently home, and they'll be home in September anyways. So I'm not having to deal with this, but I've dealt with countless corporate clients who are dealing with Zoom fatigue. I'm dealing with countless residential clients who see it in their kids, and they're frustrated with the challenges of online school and having to do Zoom calls and having to sometimes help their kids manage a call or get on a call. Is this something that the tech side of this aside, is this something that has a benefit, obviously, because people can connect, but it also hinders because it's disjointed connection?
Well, already this is disjointed connection, right? Like, so already we're not together and it's just not the same. So there's a part of me that really loves that Microsoft is doing this, because Zoom came in as the cool kid on the block. Nobody had heard of Zoom, 5 months ago, except for us who had seen it at shows. And Microsoft Teams is like this weird, powerful underdog almost. Any major company is using Teams, but there's a lot of people in the wild that have never even heard of it. And I'm always kind of surprised that if I set up a Teams call to someone not on 365, they're like, well, I just didn't know how to use it. It's the same thing. But I like that. I think that the only way that we can get better is to push some of these boundaries and to change. And that's a scary thing to do, but who better to do it than, Microsoft's got a lot of money to throw around. Like, let's try some new creative things. Let's try some Instagram-like things to get kids involved, or people can't read each other's body language as much. So I can give an emoji, a thumbs up, just to say, like, I'm with you. Is it the end all be all? No. Will it be probably this be the thing? Probably not. But I think that if we I think that this isn't good enough yet, especially for kids. I think that, teachers, at least in where I am, did a fair job at best. And I think that that's because they had to change on a dime the whole way you taught your entire life. So we have to get better. This is probably going to be a story. I don't think this will be a story we'll have for a while. It's not going to be the last time we'll go virtual. So what a great time to keep pushing forward. And anyone that is a Teams person, they've gotten so much better since it started. Teams in the beginning of when COVID started was not good. And they really have done a great job at releasing updates and getting better. And they didn't have the tile format in the beginning. So yeah, push forward, break the concept. I mean, until it's there, we won't know.
Very good. All right, we're going to leave it there on the note that Microsoft is the underdog, because I don't think that's happened since like 84.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, you're completely accurate though, because how many times have you gone in to see, especially a corporate client, and talked to them about video conferencing? And they're like, "Oh, you mean like Zoom?" I'm like, well, there's a lot.
And meanwhile, they're using 365.
Oh yeah, they're using Teams, but they think it's Zoom. It's great.
I wish they would send me the list of who was on it. I would make so much money. Let me help you, Microsoft. Microsoft, if you're listening, let me help you.
Got you. We're here to help. Thank you both so much for joining us. Heather, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Southtown AV, where can they do that?
Our website at Southtown, singular, A as in Apple, V as in Victor.com. And I have more fun probably over on Twitter, which is tech_chi, as in a balance between life and technology.
Are you saying that your job is not fun?
It's never boring.
Good answer.
Ever.
Very good answer. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to connect with you, learn more about Athlona, where can they do that?
Always at atlona.com. Definitely check us out there. And if you're using LinkedIn, check me out there. I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, Ken Eagle, on LinkedIn, all kinds of cool videos. And always, I tell everyone, check out the Athlona YouTube channel, subscribe. We put videos on there almost weekly. And if you subscribe, you'll always get those updates.
Yeah, very good. It is a great YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can hit me up at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, please stop by AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We're extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.